What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 88th episode of the Boundless Business Podcast. We have the amazing Justine, Larissa, and of course myself, Nico here. Team, how are we doing today? You doing okay?
Yeah,
Having a
doing
good
good.
Friday so far.
Yeah, it's cooling down here in Arizona. So maybe we can have sweaters in like 6 months. Um, we'll see, tentative. But with that being said, Justine, what we got going on today?
Today we're going to talk about kind of what goes into the placement of ads. So, how an ad is put in front of people, like kind of what goes into that. Um, and yeah, I will leave it off to you guys because I don't really know much about this topic.
Not yet, and that's why we do these podcasts for you to learn. So I know Larissa is itching to dive more into the weeds of what goes into it. I'm going to be brief with the strategy, and then we'll rock and roll from there. So um, the biggest thing about in this case is called traditional media buying, but the reason you, as especially as like a landscaper, you want to focus on this is once you understand. Marketing and like the nuances of it, then you are able to scale your business tremendously and with much more confidence than just throwing money at Google or Nextdoor or Angie's. You'll be actually able to like use math to see, okay, my goal is $100,000. What do I need to do to get there? So I'm going to keep it kind of broad with this topic, which means even before you start marketing, you got to figure out where can I market, right? Am I using digital, direct mail, door knocking, canvassers, whatever that mechanism? Then I gotta use that and then do the math behind it. So, Larissa, I'll have you kind of take it away since you like this topic so much more.
So ads can be really intimidating for a lot of people, and also keep in mind it might not be just the way you're used to getting leads, so it's going to be very different. When it comes to setting up successful ad campaigns for landscapers specifically, and I mean this much of this can be taken and applied to other niches. I'm just going to be specific to landscapers because that's who we help. Um, but for landscapers specifically, there's a few things you just really need to know high level on the ad side before you really jump in. One is definitely what area you're servicing and what area you want the ads to be focused in. It's really important that you have a large enough sample size to be able to like effectively run ads. So if I'm honest, if you are in a very, very small town and you just service maybe a really small region, let's say less than 50,000 people, traditional advertising, it might still work for you, just expect it to be really expensive and just expect lower volume. But it could very well still work. You just are probably going to have to be paying a couple $100s per lead. Um, However, if you're in a big metropolitan area, that expands the effectiveness of your ads significantly. So I'm based in Phoenix. I'll just use Phoenix as the example. If you can service the whole Phoenix metro, you just have millions of people that you can put your ad in front of. Versus if you're in a really small, I'll also use an Arizona town example just because those are the only ones I can reference, the only ones I know. If you're in a really small area, let's say like Globe, Arizona, which is really far away, very small town. It's like less than 50,000 people, I think. So that particular region is just going to be really small. You're not going to have,
1,162.
yeah, and I know it's pretty small, all things considered, but just keep those things in mind. Like sample size is really, really important. When you think about ads, you're thinking just data. That's the only thing you care about, right? And also keep in mind your first ads are probably going to suck. Your second ads are probably going to suck. Your third ads are probably going to suck. It's a process of getting incrementally better. So keep that in mind as well. But having a large enough population to reach is really important. So you need to make sure if you are going to be running ads, you have a good enough population size. The next thing is budget. That's something that's really important. It's really easy to be like, oh, I'll throw $50 at it, see if it gets me anything. But again, as much of the conversation around ads has to do with data, it's not a large enough sample size. So you need to have, compared to your territory, a relative good amount of ad spend and of budget to be able to spend on this.
Let's
So
some figures
Yeah,
too.
let's break that down. Let's break that down a little bit more specifically. So I'm going to give like kind of the bottom range of like if you're in the smallest territory I would recommend doing paid ads for would be if you had a population of at least 250,000. Even that is very much on the small side. I mean, in an ideal world, you're going to have at least 500 to 700,000 in your ad population. And you can see that whatever platform you're using, it doesn't matter where it is, whatever platform you're using, they'll be able to tell you how many people are in the population you've set based on your parameters. So that's kind of what you want minimum population size. At that minimum population size, you should be expecting to spend a couple $1,000s a month. So at that minimum population size, I would say a reasonable budget would be like $2,000 a month. That should be enough to get you some consistent leads in. You'll probably be getting between 5 and 10 leads a week, maybe more if it's really good, maybe a little bit less, and it's gonna go up and down week over week. But that should get you roughly where you need to be at that 2K price point. Below that, you risk again just not having enough sample size to have budget behind your ads. So any individual ad needs to just be put in front of a lot of people. It's
Yeah.
just sample size.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of play devil's advocate here. We're assuming that you're doing this by yourself, so you might not know industry numbers. So, for instance, we know, and we'll share it here, that the average artificial turf lead is anywhere between like $50 and $75 a lead. If you don't know that, you might need these higher budgets because it could be different for you, right? That would impact your math. So just keep that in mind too. Like mow and blow, like cutting grass could be as low as $15 to $30, but you need enough data, and that's why if you're going to do this by yourself, you need these higher budgets. Working with a agency, that's significantly lower because that agency should have benchmarks and be able to give you a rough estimate on that. So I just want to put that out there because I know someone heard 2,000 and they're instantly like, I don't have that money. Again, it's like a skill, right? You're not going to go to the gym, work out for a day, and lose 20 pounds, right? It might take you a couple of weeks to do with someone who's really, really good. 20 pounds is a lot, so maybe 10. Doing yourself, you have to invest a lot more to get that. So I just want to preface it with like, most people don't have a $2,000 budget. We're assuming you're going to do this by yourself. If you're working with a partner that knows the numbers, you can expedite that and cut that in half to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to make sure, people, that we have reasonable expectations and that like the big things, people understand, right? So having a good enough budget and a good enough sample size, those are the two best things you can do to have a successful ad campaign. Even if your ads suck, even if they're not good, which they probably won't be, and that's totally fine. Most ads aren't, and that's okay. Again, it all comes down to sample size and money. How much money do you have to spend? How many people do you have to put that in front of? The way most social media platforms will do is they'll do, you're placing a bid for an area. So I will give an example. If you are in Southern California, expect your leads to cost 3 times as much. The reason being is that there are a lot of people bidding for that same audience. So kind of think of social media like a billboard, right? There's only so much space that they can allocate towards ads. People are not going to use Facebook if it's 100% ads. Facebook wants to have a good ratio of like relevant posts to the individual, and then they're going to throw ads in where possible. And Facebook has a bunch of different ad placements, and that's all getting a little bit more complex than I think we need to for this conversation. But keep in mind, if there are a lot of people bidding to put their ad in front of your audience, your ads are going to cost more and your leads are going to cost more. So keep that in mind that like prices are all variable. They change depending on where you are, depending on maybe the day of the week, on the time of the week, on the money you have to spend, on the particular people you're targeting. If you're doing general broad targeting versus like really, really specific targeting, These are things that are all going to affect your costs, and it's going to affect your costs across every single platform. It doesn't matter what platform you're using. If a lot of people are bidding for your same audience, your costs will be higher. We definitely recommend have a good budget, have a good sample size. You will never know how well an ad does if you only put it in front of 100 people. That's not enough. You need like multiple thousands of people. I think a minimum number of like people who have physically seen your ad before you know even just like a little bit how it's doing is like 2,000. So you need at least 2,000 to like physically just look at your ad, whether or not they take an action, to know kind of which direction to go. I would recommend higher. I would recommend closer to 4,000 or 5,000 people who have seen it. Again, just to give yourself the benefit of the doubt with sample size, and that's so, so important. It might take you even a couple weeks to put it in front of 5,000 people, depending on your audience. It might take you a day. Just keep all those things in mind. Those, I guess, I would say for anybody who is, wondering how to get leads as a landscaper and curious about using ads, but, get scared by terms like media buying and conversion and ads and all these other like individual terms which are important and which do have meaning but don't get to the core of the issue. It's important to understand those things. So it's important to understand sample size, budget, and territory. But I guess that kind of goes into sample size.
Biggest thing is, and we should have talked about this at the beginning, but it's all about. I think the most important thing that you said, Larissa, was there are benchmarks, right? So in the beginning, you want to focus on having this ad in front of at least 2,000 people. So let's just do math, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Let's say in this, pick a platform, doesn't really matter. The platform A, YouTube ads, costs you $20 to get in front of 1,000 people. Well, to do a minimum test, you should spend $40 on getting 2,000 people. Let's say that what we look for is for every 1,000 people, we get one lead, right? So, and again, this is very dependent on your niche. These are just high level numbers. Everything could change. You should spend at least $40 to get 2 leads, right? In this example. Now, the regions, offers, everything is different. But the biggest thing is let's assign a value to it so that in this case, you should spend maybe $400 to get in front of 10,000 people, right? And expect 10-ish leads. But again, even if you just cut it off at the 2,000 mark, you're not giving yourself enough time, especially if you're new and doing this yourself and not working with an agency partner like us. You might be killing a very profitable campaign before it even gets a chance to get going. So that's the biggest thing to keep in mind is you assign numbers to it, right? Work backwards and then figure out exactly what it's going to cost. Because the first iterations is going to be a lot more expensive while you're learning before it gets better and better and better.
Yeah, your first iteration, you should expect whatever your target lead cost is. Maybe you're targeting, you're like, I want to be able to get leads in for $50 a piece. I was using $50 because it's an easy number to do math around, right? You should plan that your initial iterations of that are going to put you closer to the $70 to $80 range, especially if it's your first 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 or 5 rounds of ads. You're going to be in that higher price point until you learn. So once you kind of get your first ad sets going, then give them plenty of time to breathe, plenty of time to learn. And once they've had that time, then you can make those decisions on what's good, what's bad, what do we do more of, what do we do less of. And I guess I would also just say if you do have a big metropolitan area, keep in mind all the things I was mentioning earlier, right? So you have a lot of competitors bidding against you for the valuable real estate, which is somebody's attention. So if you're having a lot of people bidding against you, your leads are going to be more expensive. You're going to need a higher budget. So I recommend for companies who can take on a bunch of leads, I recommend your ad spend budget be closer to $5,000 to $7,000, somewhere in that range, for a larger metropolitan area. So the Phoenix area could easily support, $5,000 to $7,000 in ad spend if you had. Phoenix market itself is also large enough to be able to support, if you're a large company, you can just take leads all day. You can do like 10 estimates a day. You can be closing deals. You've got lots of crews. You should probably be spending over $10,000 to get your best results. And keep in mind, obviously those are scary numbers and you can start small and work your way up, but budget wise, just kind of keep those things in mind that like kind of your floor you should be expecting to spend over 1,500, I would say 2,000. If you just want lots and lots and lots of leads, you got to throw lots of money at it. So over $10,000 a month there, in ads for large companies that are willing to take on lots and lots of projects.
Perfect. Any other closing remarks or anything, guys?
Sample size. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing I want to like really stick in people's brain. Sample size. You need to get it in front of a lot of people.
Absolutely. Well, guys, amazing podcast. If you guys have any questions, email me at nico@boundlessmedia.com. Yeah, sample size is the number one thing. And if you guys have any questions, let us know. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast. Peace.